especially if you don't know what your goal is, how much marketing it takes to get a deal in your market with a certain channel that you're using. All you're going to see is your bank account balance going down, and you're going to feel the pain of $295 going out this month and having not gotten any deals. And you're going to feel the emotion from your spouse saying, hey, what's up with this? When are you going to get a deal? We've been spending, $600 the last couple of months, and I see no results. Well, you're just sitting around on the couch. What are you doing? And so all those negative emotions can easily build up and make you, shut down your efforts.
So this is the Resilient Real Estate Investing Podcast, hitting you with a bonus episode here with David Lecko, CEO of DealMachine. David, thank you so much for taking some time here.
Dan, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Hey, pleasure's mutual here, sir. So do you mind just kind of leading off with who you are when it comes to real estate? Maybe give a quick overview on DealMachine. I know we've done a lot of work with DealMachine in the past, but I think it'd be helpful just to kind of give an overview on who you are and what DealMachine is and does.
Oh yeah, my name's David, and I am determined, and I have a lot of grit, and I've loved taking action, especially this year, to just level up my fitness and my mental game. So I get up really early. I love working out, lifting weights, and then I do cardio every afternoon, and I just call people and customers. So focusing on my own self, focusing on a lot of discipline, and then focusing on building relationships with others in my business and personal life is who I am and what I've really enjoyed doing this past year. Now, DealMachine is a business that I created on accident. You guys know how real estate investors need to find rundown houses to flip. DealMachine is a marketing tool that you can subscribe to. It's an app on your phone that would help you find off-market properties and identify them when you're driving around looking for those rundown properties. Tells you who owns it, and then it can tell you how to get in contact with them and even send direct mail to them, as well as build lists and run comps. So it's a tool that helps real estate investors get in touch with property owners that need to sell their house at a discount. And those are the things that I focus on. I've got a rental portfolio when I was inspired by Rich Dad, Poor Dad to kind of find those rentals. And DealMachine was an app I created as I was trying to find my first rental back in 2017. So we've been around since 2017 and served about 70,000 customers since then. And it's been an amazing journey. And the best part has been meeting people like you and leveling up myself at each step of the way. So I'm excited to share some of the things that I've learned with you here, Dan, on the podcast.
Awesome. Just real quick, I mean, when you've been talking with a lot of wholesalers, a lot of people in the game, how many times does Rich Dad, Poor Dad come up? I feel like that's every conversation I have. Somebody's like, Rich Dad, Poor Dad really kicked me in the butt and got me going in real estate. What an amazing book that Robert made.
It's really amazing how much it stood the test of time, because he wrote it a long time ago, and it's still the number one way that people find themselves interested in getting interested in real estate investing. In any given room, whenever I ask that question of who got started with that book, at least 60% of the people raise their hands, over half every single time.
Yeah, talk about a legacy. Well, I guess speaking of legacies, what better way to build your own legacy of financial independence, financial wealth, than being able to source properties off market? And I wanted to have you on to talk about what you've been seeing when it comes to helping investors get properties off market, because you've had plenty of experience talking with people who are very sophisticated when it comes to getting off market deals, whether they're real estate investors or wholesalers. And I wanted just to talk about 5 just things that you see between a successful and an unsuccessful wholesaler, real estate investor when it comes to getting that property off market. All right. So 10 differences between successful and unsuccessful investors, wholesalers. Number 1, spending too much time researching before taking action. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I definitely think that's a top one, because you'll have people that go to all these events and they really haven't done a deal though. And it's kind of surprising, because I've run into them at lots of different wholesaling events across the country. They're paying money to travel and go to these events, which is great. But there's a certain point where you can only consume so much information And the next step only comes from you taking action. It's a lot harder to take action. It's scarier to take action. And it's good that people do go to events, but you've got to reach this point where you just say, I know enough. I'm going to go take action. And when I hit a roadblock, then I'm going to go figure out what to do instead of obsessing over trying to consume as much podcasts, books, conferences as possible. Going to take action is going to be the next step to accelerate where you want to go.
And do you think that that's mainly people reacting to fear, like the fear of jumping in head first?
Yes, and we also are conditioned to go do easy stuff. It's easy to go to an event. It's hard to talk to sellers. It's fun to go to an event. It's not as fun when you're scared to go talk to sellers. And I think fear is the right word to use there because they're afraid that they're going to get caught, that they don't know enough. And they're fearful of that, being found out, I think, in many cases. So fear is a good word.
Okay. So along the lines of fear, I guess, on the other end is just people who are ready to go in fearless, right? And number two here, trying too many things at once.
Mm-hmm. Trying too many things at once is not just like a newbie mistake, because I'm a member of several masterminds, and my favorite one is Collective Genius, and that I've personally been going to for years now. When somebody brand new comes into Collective Genius, first of all, they have had to do, I think, 100 deals per year or 50 deals per year, a substantial amount of deals. So this person has a business, they have a team, it's not a solopreneur, somebody that should know what they're doing. And they get so inspired when they get to one of these meetings. And there's one individual in particular, I'll just call him Bob. Bob came to that meeting and he came back, they meet quarterly. So he came back the next quarter and he's like, man, I was so inspired by this text messaging strategy that you guys talked about. I was also inspired by the Novation strategy that you guys talked about. And I was super inspired by this creative finance strategy that you guys talked about. And man, I was super excited to hear about, the way that direct mail can be optimized. And we tried all this stuff, but what I realized is with our 6-person team, trying so many things confused people, and we didn't actually get any meaningful results. And we spent a lot of money and we didn't get any results. And the reason why is because we just threw everything at the wall and we wanted to see what stuck. And that's literally the second presentation that so many people give. And Bob in particular, I remember him giving this a couple of years ago. And that's just something I wanted to highlight is if you want to be really, really good at what you do, you've got to be systematic in how you try things and how you implement new things in your business, because nobody can do everything at once. And when it comes to marketing, if you've got $10,000 to spend on something new, marketing isn't just like you do one thing and you get one result. It's kind of a long process. It takes many touch points. So if you spread 10 grand over like 5 different channels versus 10 grand into trying one new channel, you're going to get enough data when you try it all with one channel. If you spread it around, you don't really have enough data to optimize anything because you've spread it too thin.
It reminds me of a conversation that I had on the podcast with Michael Albaum, who's the head coach of the Stock Academy. And we had a little discussion on diversification, right? Diversification in real estate. And I think it's a misnomer because a lot of people who come into real estate from like stocks or just other business ventures, they think diversification's safe. And I think a lot of people kind of take that same approach when it comes to their marketing, right? Where the more I can spread out this money, the more I can diversify, the safer and the more lucrative like the end return will be. David, do you mind just kind of touching on when it comes to marketing and diversification, when it might make a lot of sense and when it might not make as much sense?
Yeah, I think that if you are talking to an expert who's done this marketing channel and they know, hey, it takes us about $5,000 to go get a deal. And we typically get over 50% of our deals from the third postcard that goes out. Well, if you have $10,000, like if that's not quite enough money to even get your first deal based on those numbers. So you've got to ask an expert in your market how much it takes to go get that. And then you've got to know the investment you have to make in order to even meet their numbers. And so if you don't have enough to like at least double that, because you're brand new at it, you're not going to be as efficient right away. I would say that's a good rule of thumb is plan to spend at least double what it takes somebody else in your market to go get that deal, and do the marketing enough times so that you're giving yourself the best chance to actually get the deal and then optimize it. Now, if you've got something that's like a machine that's running and you're spending, $20,000-$30,000 a month, then I think it's okay to actually spend money on a second channel and test that out. But don't stop what you're doing. Don't stop what works in order to test something else out. Use some extra money to test something brand new out. That way you're not risking what's already working.
I completely agree. I mean, in my W-2 is actually in media and in advertising. And there's a huge distinction between newer companies that are really looking to break into the field and honing in on one marketing channel compared to more established companies where they've already built that relationship out, but they need to experiment with different ways and see if they can't get a cheaper, lower their acquisition cost. So number 3, David, is worrying about what every tech solution tool does. As a tech CEO, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've actually made that mistake as a tech company because we got a lot of feature requests from our members. And then we built every single one of the feature requests. That created some complexity. Those features were really important, but then new people picking up the tool, they wanted demos of what every feature did. And to be frank, there's only 2 things that they need to do is they need to add properties via driving for dollars or building a list. And then they need to send mail so that they can have conversations with sellers. They don't actually need to know all the nuances of the different team levels of people you can add to your account. They don't need to know how to build a multi-step mail sequence so that you can configure the custom postcards to send in a certain sequence. And what you really just need to do is repeat the same postcard over and over again, and you just need to add properties and send mail. Those are the 2 things you need to do to be successful. So worrying about what every feature does can be a hang-up, and it can be a version of number 1, which was doing too much research before taking action.
I was about to make that analogy. It's if you spend way too much time evaluating every aspect of a solution. I mean, because every tool, and I'm sure DealMachine's the same thing, it's different tools for a different element of the same job, right? But as a investor, as a wholesaler, as a business owner, you just need to see like, hey, is this one aspect of the tool at least going to help justify the cost and give me the return that I'm looking for?
So we moved a lot of the advanced features out of the lower tiered plans and just saved it from the elite level plan, to keep it simple for people who are just picking up the tool.
So speaking of keeping it simple, number 4, spending too much time on a dead lead. And I say keeping it simple because as a sales rep, I have done this all the time, and I keep on coming back to it like, man, why am I spending all this time looking to get hold of this one person who is never going to buy? What thoughts do you have, David, on spending too much time on a dead lead?
Yeah, I actually was a victim of this mindset. I lived in Carmel, Indiana. That was where I bought my first house. And right around the corner there, first of all, my whole neighborhood was like built in the 70s or 80s, which is old for Carmel because Carmel's grown. It's been the fastest growing city in America a few years in a row. And so one of these houses hadn't been kept up. And I saw it had like these great big bushes. It was like the shingles were falling off. I was like, I have to get this deal because it is right around the corner. It's right here. I know the neighborhood. That is my deal. And I would obsess over it. Every day I would look at it. Every day I'd try to hit him up with a text message. Every day I'd make sure that my mail was still going out. And listen, I don't even think to this day it's sold. It's literally been 6 years. It still hasn't sold. And so don't get into this trap and think that, oh, wow, just because you're looking for a rundown house and there's one right by you, that's going to be your deal. No, I should have, instead of worrying about that one house, what I should have done is just found like 300 houses like that. It is a numbers game. You've got to pump, you've got to actually have a lot of conversations before you find one that's going to be a great deal. So don't obsess over that one really what would be amazing deal if they're not ready to sell. You've just got to find like 300 houses like that instead of just worrying about the one that's close to you.
It's a numbers game. And I mean, that's with all sales, right? The more you put into your pipeline, the better chance you're going to get at least one out. David, you kept on saying 300 deals, 300 properties. Is that the kind of what you see as far as like how many properties, you market to and you'll eventually get a deal, or do you have stats on that?
If you're driving for dollars, 300 is definitely the minimum number that you want to hit in any market around the country. Now, if you're in a really high dollar market like LA, that number is more like 1,000. But if you're in the Midwest, it's about 300 rundown properties, and then you need to send mail to them at least 3 times each. And I say that 300 for anyone listening because a lot of times if somebody isn't successful or they didn't feel like it worked, they've only added like 10 properties. And so it's kind of the same thing. They're getting really focused on just these few deals that they found. You need to pump the numbers up exactly like you said. So minimum 300 is what anyone should be aiming for to find in terms of like rundown houses driving for dollars.
So you said 300 houses, and then I think you also said 3 touch points. Is that also kind of what you see as a good rule of thumb, 303 to get at least one deal?
Yeah, if you only send 3 postcards, you're still missing out on 50% of your deals. We've done the research with our members, but a lot of people just send it once and they're like, "Oh, I didn't hear back from them." But so I say at least 3 because at the bare minimum, you need to be reaching out 3 times.
I think that's some foreshadowing for a later tip down the line here. But moving on, number 5, having too skinny of a deal. David, what thoughts do you have on just margins and knowing what price you should be asking for?
Yep. Yeah. So I actually did a deal, or I was trying to do a deal on Brookside Avenue in Indianapolis. It was like a property owned by this church, and I had it locked up for $20,000. Then I contacted because I needed to find a buyer, and I didn't really have a buyer's list because I was a pretty new real estate investor. I contacted Simple Wholesaling in Indianapolis, which is one of the bigger operators there. And I was like, "Hey, can you guys help me sell this deal?" And they took a look at it and they're like, "Look, even if you totally fix this up and put it in perfect condition, the max price would be like $35,000. So there's no way that we can make money doing this deal unless you renegotiate it, get the price down to like $10,000. And so I just had too skinny of a deal. There wasn't enough meat on the bone for anybody to make money doing that deal. And so in order for the seller to have a good, transparent experience, you've got to get better at comping so that you can lock it up for the right kind of price at the get-go and leave yourself at least 20% margin.
20% margin. I'm thinking of like that rule of thumb when it comes to flippers of trying to get that property for 70% of ARV. You said trying to lock in a 20% margin. Do you have any other rules of thumb when it comes to quoting or trying to get a deal locked in?
One thing I realized is if you do houses that are very similar footprint, it becomes insanely fast to estimate what the repair costs are going to be because you're familiar, you've already replaced everything in that house. So the cookie cutter houses are always my favorite if I'm going to take on a renovation project because it's just pull out that spreadsheet from last time and put together those numbers, and that's going to be pretty accurate.
Gotcha. All right, so moving on to number 6. Daisy chaining a deal, and I have to imagine that this is not about jewelry. It's somehow related to real estate.
That's right. It reminds me in my backyard when I was growing up, there were these like pieces of grass and I'd like loop it around and then like shoot off. They weren't daisies, but they were like some kind of grass with like a little bulb on the end. And that was a really fun game. You could shoot those off at your friends. But daisy chaining a deal is when you are on a wholesaler's, buyer's list and you see multiple wholesalers sending you the same deal. That's actually illegal. And so you can get yourself into trouble, but more likely it's just like legit people will know that you're not legit because they're seeing your deal coming out on other wholesalers' lists. And that's called daisy chaining. You're not allowed to market a property unless you yourself have a vested interest in that property, meaning that you've got it locked up or that you own it. So if you're just marketing other people's deals, know that that's illegal. You could get in trouble, but even more likely is the people on your buyer's list are going to be receiving that from other people, and they're going to like realize like you're not really doing things in a legit way, so it's not great for your reputation.
Yeah, I think that wholesaling, it's why it's so appealing. It's a low barrier to entry, right? Like anybody can get into wholesaling for the most part, but the wholesalers that are successful, at least in my market and through my experience, are the ones who are as professional as possible. And so obviously avoiding legal issues is a pretty clear indicator that you're a pro at what you do at wholesaling. So talking about being a pro, number 7, not marketing during December or when you're working on a deal. Why do professionals typically keep on marketing?
Well, a lot of people in the real estate space kind of take December off as like a vacation. I'm all about vacations, but I've run into this with a few customers where they're working really hard on the deals that they have, and then when they get to the finish line, then they're like, well, what deal do I do next? And as we said earlier, marketing takes at least 3 touch points, which if you're sending mail, it's like 2 months, right? So you're going to be marketing for a few months where you're just not going to have any lead flow. And so I think the ideal scenario is that you're always able to do deals. I wouldn't stop during December. I wouldn't stop while you're working on a deal. I'd continue marketing and adding leads to your pipeline throughout the entire year, because that's just going to set you up better for whenever that person is ready to sell, and you'll get the ROI on that marketing. If they're ready to sell and your postcard's not in front of their doorstep, they're going to sell to somebody else regardless of how many postcards you sent previously. And so that's why I feel like this is a really important one, is to stay consistent with your marketing. That's the name of the game, is just be consistent.
Consistency is so key. I mean, in any form of sales. And what makes sales so interesting is you could have a great quarter, you could have a great year even, but if you celebrate too hard, you could have an awful next quarter, you could have an awful next year. And if you're a professional wholesaler, right, you don't have a paycheck, you don't have a base income from your employer, right? Like you need to stay consistent so you can keep on putting food on the table.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Now, number 8, not asking for referrals from people. So kind of along the line, you've just secured that deal. Why do pros typically move on to that next deal and see if they can't get a referral?
Well, whenever I did my first deal, I felt weird at first because it was not a skinny deal. Like I was making money on it, and I almost felt guilty for that. What you need to remember is the person sold you their house because they needed to sell that house and they couldn't list it with an agent. They couldn't get the money they needed in the time frame that they wanted to. And so you provided them a service. One of the most impactful ways to do more business is to showcase the social proof that you did a good job. And I was really afraid of asking, but I asked him if he would film a quick video with me just to highlight what the experience was like. And then I was able to put that on my Carrot website. And so now I built in some social proof to the service that I provide. That way, the next person who came across my marketing and looked at my website, they would see me on video with an actual seller and hopefully feel more comfortable about doing a transaction. I know I look at reviews constantly when I'm buying a new product online through Amazon or whatever it is. And the reviews are so important because it's more honest than the person's write-up about themselves. And so that's what I mean by referrals. I also mean that if that person had a good experience with you, you should pull a play from one of my good friends, Kyle Enlow's book. Now, he's a financial advisor, and financial advisors are very good at this because they live and breathe off of referrals. Is they'll ask, could you provide 3 people that you think would really benefit from talking about this life insurance plan? And you can do that too with people who you just did a solid transaction with, if they know anyone else who's potentially interested in selling their house. And by asking for 3, it's kind of like a concrete fill in the blank that they need to fill out. And so you'll get some better results that way if you ask that way, is what I've found.
Yeah, I mean, that's the referrals are the cheapest form of marketing. But David, you mentioned that video and putting it up on your Carrot website. Do you mind just giving an overview on what Carrot is, and also how that video kind of sounded like and how you approached it?
Yeah. So Carrot is a company that can help you set up a website to market for your real estate business. They've got a website that you can set up in 30 seconds. It has a lot of content already on there, filling in the blanks, asking common questions that people will have. And so I highly recommend it. It's worth it. And they've also put a lot of effort into being one of the fastest websites to load, which helps you begin to rank on Google if you're going to put forth a search engine optimization effort, right? So you get those free leads by being ranked in Google. The video, I actually was pretty nervous whenever I was recording it, so I think it sounded a little bit robotic, but it didn't matter, right? Because like it is kind of endearing, I think. And then the guy was just like, man, David was very honest. He kind of talked slow. David bought my house for this price, and it went very smoothly. So it wasn't anything astounding, but I think my favorite part about it was real. It showed what I was feeling in the moment. It showed what he was feeling in the moment. And it's still out there today. LeckoProperties.com is my website if you wanted to check it out and find that video.
Cool. We'll have a link to that video and to your website in the show notes. I guess kind of wrapping up on the referral side, how often do you see like those referrals ultimately converting? Because I have to imagine those are pretty juicy leads.
Great question. So I think that the video, it gets seen every time my website loads. But no, I don't have a specific deal that I could talk to you about referrals for on the house side. I've done like 9 transactions, I think. So really not enough volume there to tell you some results of some referrals that I've had, except for, I would just leave it at that. But who I was thinking of as well whenever I talked about the referrals was Paul Myers from Augusta, Georgia. He actually does half of his deals. So he did like 1.2 million in revenue so far this year. So half of that, around $600,000 worth of deals through agent referrals. And so he actually presents to agents in his market, and there's a tension there between agents and wholesalers. They don't like each other typically. And so he comes and educates them on how wholesalers can help agents with these deals that they can't list, and how the agents can benefit from that if they refer those to Paul. And Paul's favorite thing to say is like, listen, the agent's still going to be an agent. So they're always going to be coming across these things. So if you can build a good relationships and get referrals from them, it's free marketing other than the time you put into it. And the same person can give you multiple referrals. So that's a really cool strategy that I haven't personally done, but working with investors, I know how powerful referrals can be.
Yeah. And I mean, talk about that contention between agents and wholesalers. If you're able to kind of bridge the gap and build that trust, that's a huge competitive advantage against all the other wholesalers in that market who, might still be nervous about approaching agents, right? So I think that's a very, very, very good tip.
Mm-hmm.
Number 9, being emotional with their marketing instead of understanding how much marketing it actually takes. And you've touched on this a bunch about how well you know your numbers and how effective your marketing needs to be in order to get that deal. Why do you think emotion, plays a role or doesn't play a role in all that?
Especially if you don't know what your goal is, how much marketing it takes to get a deal in your market with the certain channel that you're using. All you're going to see is your bank account balance going down, and you're going to feel the pain of $295 going out this month and having not gotten any deals. And you're going to feel the emotion from your spouse saying, hey, what's up with this? When are you going to get a deal? We've been spending, $600 the last couple of months, and I see no results. Well, you're just sitting around on the couch. What are you doing? And so all those negative emotions can easily build up and make you, shut down your efforts. And then, of course, you'll never get an ROI on your return. So not that you want to spend endlessly, but knowing that it takes $800 typically in your market to get a deal. Now, that would be really good. That's pretty low. It's kind of like that visual where you see somebody mining for gold and then they give up and they're only like an inch from the gold, but they didn't know that, right? And so just kind of knowing how far they need to go to get that gold, and then probably doubling it because you're brand new and you probably need to account for like inefficiencies and learning, is definitely a good goal to have, so that you don't let your emotion just shut it down when you're just right there next to the gold.
Oh, especially for your first deal too, because in speaking with wholesalers, that first deal just takes forever. Like, do you have a kind of rule of thumb as far as a beginner, how long it takes to actually get that first deal? And in addition to that, like how much money they typically have to spend on marketing to get that deal. I think you said like a rule of thumb was like $5,000 earlier, but hoping to kind of flesh that out for the newbies.
Yeah, man, this rolls right into 10, so I'm going to go for it. Is thinking you're putting in the work when you are really doing like 20 minutes of effort per day. And that 20 minutes of effort is like checking emails or like browsing around Zillow. That's not revenue generating work. So if you could spend at least 15 hours a week, driving around looking for the worst houses and then sending mail or text messaging or calling them, if you can legitimately spend 15 hours a week doing that, not a chance you'll make less than $100,000. I've never seen anyone who actually works that much and doesn't get a deal in their first year. So that would be something I would definitely give you guys as a benchmark and I've fallen short on this too, is I think I'll be making cold calls, right? I'll be like, man, I've been at this for 2 hours. And then I look at my dialer and it says total talk time, 35 minutes. I did spend a lot of time dialing, but it's just like, okay, yeah, I got up, got a coffee, I went to the bathroom, like checked Facebook during that time too. So it's like, damn, like I'm not putting in 2 hours. That was 30 minutes of talking. So it really does pay off to spend, to track how much effort you're putting in and aim for like 15 hours a week.
It really sounds like a theme with all this is just being very regimented on the data, right? What you're spending your marketing on, how effective that marketing is, how you're spending your time, how effective your the end result is on all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess on maybe a number 11, maybe a bonus tip, David, are there any tools or any ways that people can keep that data, on how they're able to manage that performance, like you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, if you're using a dialer like Mojo Dialer, it's going to tell you how many hours you dialed. So that's definitely a tool I would recommend using. It also speeds up your ability. You don't have to dial it yourself. But yeah, I mean, if you're just starting out, I mean, DealMachine as well tracks how many hours that you drive and how many properties that you add. So that counts as well. And also be honest with yourself. If you're driving for an hour and you only added 2 properties, that's probably not good enough. You probably need to be adding at least like 12 per hour, and then put in the hours to continue finding those deals and make sure you're spending at least 15 hours a week, and you're going to earn money. You're going to figure it out if you keep that up for a whole year.
15 hours a week for a whole year for a reasonably good chance of making $100,000 a year, $100,000 at the end of that year, I should say.
Never seen
it seems like a pretty good ROI.
Yeah, never seen anyone make less by putting that kind of time into this business.
Very cool. Well, David, thank you so much for taking some time here and for dropping some knowledge. Where can people learn more about you and learn more about DealMachine?
Hey, check me out on Instagram. I'm DLecko, DLECKO. And then our website is DealMachine.com. We'd love to chat with you. Hit us up in the chat on either platform and check out a free trial of the app as well.
Awesome. Well, hey, David, thank you again so much.